Discover the incredible moment when a homeless woman transformed a billionaire's life in 30 days. Jack stared out his towering office windows, the once beautiful view of the Golden Gate Bridge, now a mundane backdrop to his life. The vibrant hues of sunset did nothing to soften the gnawing emptiness inside him. At 45, he had everything a man could desire: wealth, power, status. Yet each day felt like he was clawing his way up an endless mountain, where the summit vanished before he could reach it. The thrill of success that once drove him evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell. He slumped into his designer chair, heart pounding not with excitement but anxiety. Was this it? This unshakable weight on his chest was suffocating, compelling yet shaming him. How could a man with billions feel so vacant? He questioned if he'd lost touch with what mattered, or if he'd ever truly known. The glamour of board meetings and techno-galas faded, and all he felt was isolation in a world that revered him. A final ambition? It felt more like a prison. Decisions layered with layers of pressure kept circling him, smothering the original fire that sparked his venture into tech. What was he chasing? With a sudden need to escape the glass confines, he left the office, his mind racing through a blur of obligations and expectations. Wandering the streets of San Francisco, he found himself in a local park, where laughter mingled with the sound of children at play. The chaos felt alive. It drew him in like a magnet. In that moment, Jack saw the rawness of existence. It felt intoxicating, exhilarating, yet unsettling. That's when he encountered Sarah. Her weathered face told tales of struggle, but her spirit radiated resilience. There was warmth in her presence, a stark contrast to the sterile world he inhabited. Sarah was a former educator, smart and insightful, now living on the streets, accumulating knowledge from life's cruelties. Jack felt an urge to engage with her, teetering between surprise and judgment at his own attraction towards her authenticity. They began sharing sandwiches on those park benches, their conversations blooming into something deeper. Little by little, Jack could sense the shift inside him as she unraveled the true meanings behind community and family, walking him through hardships less out of pity and more out of shared human experience. But it scared him. He wrestled internally, questioning if he was somehow responsible for the disparity between their lives, even as he recognized her wisdom, something he craved, yet felt unworthy of. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every visit to the park, the pull toward Sarah intensified, battling against the expectations from his affluent peers who questioned his descent into the underbelly of the city. It felt like betrayal, like he was flirting with madness. When he learned about Sarah's passion for art, her vivid pieces reflecting her journey, it ignited an urge inside him. Could he fund an exhibit? But doubt crept in. Would his affluent friends see this as a publicity stunt? The clock ticked loudly in Jack's mind. He was torn between two worlds, the static success of tech and the fluid authenticity Sarah represented. Every decision felt monumental, every moment spent with her both enlightening and terrifying. Could he break down the walls he had built around himself, or would he let his past consume him? As obstacles began to rise, Jack felt the weight of words unsaid, the tension between who he used to be and who he was becoming, threatening to fracture him entirely. The moment arrived when their paths, once convergent, now felt like unraveling threads waiting to snap. Jack stood at a precipice of vulnerability. Where would he land? Would he dare to leap? Anxiety swirled as the transformational journey loomed ahead, urging readers, and Jack, to question what success truly meant. Jack wandered the park, Sarah's laughter still echoing in his mind. He caught sight of her vibrant sketches strewn across the bench they frequented. Each drawing, a piece of her soul, pulsed with colors that brought life to her struggles. Intrigued by her art, It stirred something deep within him, an unearthing of creativity he had buried under corporate jargon and boardroom strategies. This was what had been missing, a connection to something beyond profit margins and binary numbers. Yet doubt soon crept in, wrapping around his thoughts like a vine. What would his colleagues think? He'd built a reputation as a titan of the tech industry. Innovators didn't mingle with those on the fringes of society, an unspoken code. Memories of past executives scowling at anything that reeked of charity flooded his thoughts. Could he face that judgment? Would he risk it all for an abstract ideal of art and authenticity? The weight of inaction pressed heavily on his chest. In those moments of silence with Sarah, he had glimpsed a world filled with possibility, a life lived with color and depth. But as he reeled from fear, his impulse to act wrestled against years of conditioning teaching him to prioritize stock prices over human connection. Was there more to life than a bottom line? After a restless night filled with visions of Sarah's art, he woke determined. The decision had twisted inside him, evolving from an idea into a plan. He would call his network, arrange a small art viewing, and invite people. Art shouldn't only be adored by the privileged, it should inspire those craving to be heard. Yet as he sat in front of his computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard, fear struck again. What if his friends laughed? What if his peers labeled him a fool? The mental tug-of-war paralyzed him momentarily, as if his success shackled him to the very solitude he was trying to escape. In that moment of frustration, something within Jack cracked. This time, he didn't want to shrink from possibility. He logged on to social media, hesitant, and typed a simple post inviting friends to experience a collection of art from local creators in the park, featuring one exceptional piece from a woman he'd met, Sarah. His pulse raced as he clicked share. The digital void swallowed his words. He exhaled sharply, realizing he had just crafted a bridge into the very life he sought to understand. Over the next few days, excitement mingled with the dread of public scrutiny. Conversations with Sarah grew deeper, revealing her struggles and triumphs. In her stories, he found reflections of his own battles with self-worth and validation. Art wasn't just escape for her. It was a voice, a means to articulate what society often silenced. With each encounter, the rhythm of his heartbeat felt more aligned with a true purpose. Jack began evolving beyond the man who once nestled in a gilded cage. The tension began to unravel, revealing layers of potential and connection previously obscured by his wealth. He started seeing the world through Sarah's eyes, not as a charity case, but as an ally shaping the narrative of her life. Yet just as he felt himself transform, doubt slithered back in. The critics loomed in his mind. Would the community embrace Sarah, or would this be perceived as another instance of performance art for the rich? Pushing past this anxiety, he chalked it up to fear of failure, allowing it to fuel his resolve instead. The day of the viewing arose. As he stood outside the makeshift gallery in the park, a knot tightened in his gut. People began to arrive, some curious, others skeptical, and then a whisper of hope brushed against him. He knew that beneath the weight of success lay a passion waiting to emerge. Jack could not help but ponder if he could truly become part of this tapestry instead of just a spectator. This was not just Sarah's moment. This was his too. A leap of faith that could redefine his very existence. As he welcomed the first guests, a strange thrill surged through him. He was, for the first time in years, on the edge of raw vulnerability. But the looming question remained, would this be the breakthrough he longed for, or would exposure unveil fears he hadn't yet confronted? The crowd shifted like a restless tide, a mixture of intrigued glances and hesitant shuffles. Jack felt the air thrum with an unspoken tension that resonated within him. He had extended an invitation into the unknown, a delicate weave of his professional past and the vibrancy of Sarah's artistic spirit. As he mingled with guests, exchanging pleasantries, he sensed the weight of judgmental gazes while simultaneously yearning for connection, a dichotomy that tore at his insides. He approached a group clustered around Sarah's artwork, which was illuminated softly in the fading light of day. The whispers crackled like electricity, floating around him as he caught bits of conversation. What does this even mean? And is it really the work of a homeless woman? Each word pricked at his resolve, a reminder of the stigma he was trying to dismantle. Jack steeled himself, steeling against both the external criticism and the internal doubt clawing at him. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, as his thoughts danced from self-loathing to determination. He had come too far to allow this event to falter under the weight of others' opinions. In that moment, he recognized a truth nestled within himself. Anyone could critique from the sidelines, but it took courage to step forward, to engage, and to be vulnerable. Art connects us all, he declared, projecting confidence he barely felt. A few heads turned toward him, and he forced himself to hold their gaze. Sarah is not just an artist, she's a voice. This is her story, one of resilience and creativity, and it deserves to be celebrated. As the words spilled from his lips, he realized he was laying bare his own desires, stripping away the facade of a corporate titan and revealing the man who longed to connect with deeper truths. It was a liberating sensation. Would this night lead to ridicule or, perhaps, to a resonance he could not yet fathom? At the edge of the gathering he caught sight of Sarah, her hands deftly moving between sketches as she engaged animatedly with a couple. A burst of pride surged through him. This was her space. Her vulnerability shone through, drawing in those who truly listened. His presence by her side was not one of dominance but of solidarity. Just then, a tall man, someone Jack recognized from the industry, cut through the crowd and strode towards him. The fear returned, prickling the back of his neck as he prepared for the worst. "I didn't know you were into this kind of thing," the man said, sneering slightly. "Are you really trying to play savior here?" The accusation hung heavy, a challenge that pierced through Jack's moment of clarity. Beneath the poise and charm he had spent years honing, anger simmered. Did this man truly believe Jack was just a rich benefactor seeking to polish his image? Yes, critically, he had wealth. But wealth without connection was hollow, and tonight he sought more. "Isn't it time we used our privilege to amplify voices that are too often ignored?" Jack countered, feeling the fire ignite in his core. "I'm not here to save anyone. I want to listen and learn, to understand a perspective that has been kept at bay for too long." The challenge went unanswered as the man turned away, met with the cacophony of guests who had gravitated toward the gallery. The thrill of standing his ground invigorated Jack, filling him with a sense of agency he had missed in the sterile boardrooms of tech. As new faces converged, he felt a shift. This was no longer just an art viewing. It was a celebration layered with meaning, a moment charged with authenticity that whispered promises of transformation. Yet even amid the burgeoning connections, his mind darted between exhilaration and anxiety. Could he shift perceptions tonight, challenging the status quo entrenched in both his world and Sarah's? The stakes felt higher with each passing minute, but as more guests embraced Sarah's work, he saw an undeniable truth materialize. Jack was willing to endure scrutiny if it brought forth understanding. As Jack stood on that precipice, however, just when he thought he could finally embrace the transformation he sought, the ground beneath him shook unexpectedly when a voice called out from the back of the crowd, pulling everyone's attention and derailing his newfound resolve. The rush of adrenaline steadied to a precarious tension. "Who allowed this to happen?" the voice boomed, slicing through the merriment like a knife. "What right do you have to bring us together?" All eyes turned, and Jack's heart raced as he confronted the figure striding toward him, a familiar antagonist from his past. The moment had arrived to face the harsh realities of his choices, and now he stood at a crossroad that would determine not only the night's outcome, but also the path of his burgeoning identity. Jack's breath hitched as he recognized the man approaching, a former colleague, Greg, who had relished in undermining Jack's ambitions throughout their shared corporate ascent. The reminders of their past encounters flooded Jack's mind, tinged with discomfort and unwelcomed nostalgia. Greg's presence felt like a thundercloud looming over the night, a harbinger of doubt that threatened to unravel everything Jack had fought for. "Look at this charade," Greg spat, his voice thick with disdain. "A billionaire playing patron to a homeless artist. It's pathetic." With each word, Jack felt the air thicken. Internal voices began to echo. self-doubt creeping in, mocking his efforts, questioning his worth. Jack steadied himself, an unexpected surge of defiance urging him forward. "I think you're missing the point, Greg," he replied, forcing calm into his tone, though his heart hammered in protest. "This isn't about my wealth or Sarah's past. It's about recognizing the value we often overlook." The crowd was tense, caught in the crossfire of their heated exchange. Jack could sense the uncertainty rippling through the onlookers. It was a moment ripe with potential. Here lay the opportunity not only to defend Sarah, but to redefine his own identity before those who had once cast him in a particular light. A woman in the back whispered to a friend, "Is he really prepared for this?" Jack caught the question, and it gnawed at him. Was he really prepared? "Do you want to talk about society's judgment, Greg? Society wants to poke at the unusual, the uncomfortable," Jack continued. He felt a sense of urgency, as if his words might peel back layers of ignorance, not just for others, but for himself as well. Instead of hiding from it, we should embrace it. What's wrong with challenging perceptions? Greg sneered. "You're so far removed from reality, Jack. This is a pathetic attempt at redemption. Your money can't change what you are." With every jab, Jack felt waves of vulnerability crash against his fragile resolve. But instead of retreating into defensiveness, his thoughts recalibrated. What if he spun Greg's barb into a lesson about transformation? "That's where you're wrong," he replied, fortifying his stance. "Real change starts when we engage with the world around us. Tonight isn't just about art. It's a chance for us to understand lives that exist parallel to ours." Silence spread among the crowd, stretching thick and heavy. Jack saw a flicker of curiosity in some eyes, a glimmer of hope perhaps. Here he was, a figure they expected to conform to their perceptions, but instead, he was standing his ground, breaking free from the tightly wound expectations of success that had once dictated his choices. Greg arched an eyebrow, somewhat intrigued but mostly suspicious. "And what do you plan to do about it? Just stand there and speak platitudes?" Feeling a jolt of clarity, Jack became acutely aware of how afraid he had been to step into this role of advocacy. To speak from a place of authenticity was terrifying, yet empowering. "I plan to listen, to let voices like Sarah's resonate. That's a step toward understanding. Maybe you should open your eyes to the beauty in stories that don't fit your mold." The firmness of his voice surprised him, a revelation breaking through layers of self-imposed limitation. As the words left his mouth, he felt chains loosen around his thoughts. He was no longer the impassive executive. He was an individual capable of bringing forth change, willing to embrace vulnerability for a cause that felt larger than himself. Around them, murmurs could be heard, conversations sparking anew. The tension in the air dynamically shifted as guests cautiously began to engage with one another, eyes darting between Sarah's artwork and the unfolding confrontation. Jack caught a glimpse of Sarah watching him intently, her expression a mix of hope and encouragement. For the first time, he considered that this moment was more than just a defense. It was an invitation for everyone, himself included, to explore the depth of what empathy could feel like. But just as buoyancy filled his chest, Greg's laughter cut through the newfound connections like a sword. "You really think you can change perceptions? You will fail, just like you always have." With the last statement hanging ominously in the air, Jack felt a familiar sensation of doubt creeping back. Yet despite the harshness, a flicker of determination ignited within him. Now was not the time to waver. This was his moment to reclaim his narrative. As Greg turned to leave, Jack realized that standing his ground was a chapter of strength he could write for himself. Ironically, this confrontation with the past might be precisely what he needed to solidify his newfound purpose. The crowd waited, breath suspended, hungry for resolution. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow flit through the corridor leading to the exit. Someone familiar, someone he had thought was lost in the noise of the night. Jack's heart raced. Who was it? "Now what?" Jack whispered to himself, knowing he would have to stand firm, whatever the next revelation might bring. Jack's mind raced as he scanned the room, searching for the source of that fleeting shadow. He fought to hold on to the momentum he had built with Greg's challenge. The crowd buzzed with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity, and he was acutely aware that the stakes were higher than ever. This was not just a social gathering. It was a defining moment in his journey, one that could propel him into uncharted waters or drown him in self-doubt. As he turned, his gaze landed on a figure emerging from the crowd, a woman wrapped in layers of oversized clothing. Her face was partially obscured by a scarf, but Jack could see a familiarity in her posture, a strength hidden beneath the tattered fibers. It was Sarah's friend from the shelter, the one who had first introduced Jack to the complex world of street art. What had her name been? Clara? Jack half-echoed as the woman moved closer. Recognition lit her eyes as she nodded, a tentative smile breaking through the layers of her worn features. Despite the adversity she faced, there was a warmth in her presence that drew Jack in. Suddenly, all other concerns fell away. "Jack," she said, her voice steady, yet laced with a hint of disbelief. "I didn't think you'd come back after last time." "What do you mean?" he asked, curiosity and confusion battling for dominance in his mind. "Last time? Did I?" "Your speech. The one that made you sound like you were going to save the world," Clara interrupted, a knowing look in her eyes. "But you were just trying to buy redemption. I heard you figured things out, though." Jack felt her words sink in, the accusation dulling the adrenaline coursing through him. Had he truly been trying to redeem himself? Was that all this transformation represented? He hesitated, a flood of insecurities resurfacing. "I'm trying to understand," he finally admitted. "I'm trying to change, but—" Clara stepped even closer, her voice softening. "But you can't just talk about it, Jack. You need to walk it too. Action speaks louder." Her gaze was piercing, and it penetrated the layers of confusion and uncertainty he had wrapped himself in. What did that truly mean for him? Would he have to step outside of his privileged bubble and embrace the reality of those he was trying to help? The very thought tossed him back into his mind's turbulent storm. "But I don't know how," he blurted, frustration giving voice to his self-doubt. "What can a person like me possibly do to change anything?" "Be vulnerable," she said simply, echoing the sentiment he had just found in that fierce verbal exchange with Greg. "You need to show them that you're real. Revealing yourself will show others that you care. You want to make a difference? Start right here." The weight of her words settled over him. He realized Clara wasn't just a bystander. She had insight born from survival. Jack understood at that moment that his battle for personal growth wasn't solely about changing others' perceptions of him. It was about transforming inside to resonate with the human experience. But before he could fully process this revelation, Clara abruptly turned to the gathering crowd. "What about you?" she asked aloud. "Are you here just to look, or are you willing to listen, to understand?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with implication, calling everyone to action. Jack watched as their eyes widened, uncertain but hopeful. Their attention shifted. It was as if Clara had ignited something in them, a flicker of collective curiosity to grasp the deeper meanings of empathy and understanding. Jack felt a surge of nervous energy. This was more than just about defending Sarah or confronting Greg. It was about taking the collective uncertainty and directing it towards realization and growth. With renewed conviction, he responded, "Clara's right. I've been standing at the edge, and it's time to dive in." The words came out with force, fueled by a burgeoning conviction he had yet to recognize in himself. As he gazed back at Clara, a new determination coursed through him. In that moment, he understood he couldn't operate from a fear of failure. Instead, he had to embrace uncertainty as part of his path, learning to listen and engage with the very people he was trying to uplift. "Let's do this," he declared, looking around the crowd and feeling the air charge with possibility. "Let's start a dialogue." Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows beyond Clara, someone unexpected, a face from another chapter of his life. Jack's breath caught in his throat as recognition flooded him, igniting a series of unanswered questions. "Why are you here?" Jack whispered, confusion and anticipation clashing within him. Little did he know, the answer would demand he confront the very core of what he thought he'd learned. Jack's heart pounded as the familiar figure stepped into the light. It was Alex, his old friend from college, the one who had always encouraged him to think beyond his privileged existence, to challenge the complacency that came with success. Their paths had diverged after graduation, and now, standing before him, Alex carried an air of confidence that made Jack acutely aware of how much he had changed, or perhaps how much he had not. "What are you doing here?" Jack managed, his voice trembling with a mix of emotion. "I'm here for you, Jack," Alex replied, an amused smile playing on his lips. "I heard you were making waves, and I had to see it for myself." Jack felt exposed under Alex's gaze, as if silently judged for every decision he'd made since they last met. "I'm trying to make a difference," he said defensively, the words rushing out as if to justify his existence. "But it's not easy to know where to start." "Making a difference starts with the truth. Your truth," Alex asserted, his expression turning serious. The crowd had quieted. They were now eavesdropping on a conversation that felt both private and intensely public. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if they too were waiting for Jack to reveal the layers hiding beneath his surface. "Maybe you should tell them what you're really afraid of," Alex prodded, his voice low enough to feel intimate. Jack's throat dry, he felt the weight of vulnerability pressing down. Clara's words echoed in his mind. Be vulnerable. Here was an opportunity to confront not just his history of privilege, but the fears that came with it. "I'm afraid that I'm just playing the part," he began, his voice gaining strength. "That I might be here to boost my image instead of genuinely helping anyone." The honesty seemed to resonate deeply with the crowd. A few heads nodded in recognition. Jack could see reflections of his internal struggle mirrored in their expressions, their curiosity shifting to concern. "Every person that we want to help has a story, and often those stories are painful. My fear is that I don't know how to communicate with that pain. I don't know how to reach them when I'm so far from their reality," he confessed, the words spilling out like a secret he had kept hidden for far too long. Alex stepped closer, his voice steady and encouraging. "You want to change lives, but you first have to disclose your own. Transform your fear into dialogue. Only then can you transcend the barriers you've created." Jack could feel the heaviness in his heart begin to lift. Trading pretense for authenticity was daunting, yet it felt like the only way forward. He glanced over to Clara, who offered him a supportive nod, and he felt his determination solidify. "Okay, let's talk," Jack said to the crowd, his voice steadying. "If I'm going to make a difference, I also need to understand you and what you face daily. So let's break down these walls together." As his words settled in the atmosphere, an unexpected wave of nervous anticipation washed over him. He realized he was not just stepping outside his comfort zone, but he was dismantling the very constructs that had supported his identity thus far. Jack sensed a ripple in the crowd as individuals began responding, sharing their stories, their fears, their dreams. He was no longer running from discomfort. He was engaging with it, transforming it. It was exhilarating, yet terrifying. Jack recognized that this moment was pivotal. He would have to confront the parts of himself that resisted change and openness comfortably. But he didn't know if he had the strength to sustain this new path. Would he falter when faced with deeper truths? As the conversations flowed around him, he stole a glance at Alex. For once, someone else was waiting on the sidelines of his journey, eager to see if Jack would truly commit to this transformative process. "Can I actually do this?" Jack wondered silently. The challenge of overcoming self-doubt loomed larger, demanding that he step fully into this new role and embrace the journey that lay ahead. The moment thickened as the crowd's energy grew, leaving Jack anticipating the excitement and trepidation that came with revealing his vulnerabilities. And just as the dialogue surged forward, a distant sound echoed from the entrance, an uninvited chaos that threatened to disrupt everything he was building. He turned to see shadows creeping back into the light, and with them, the specter of his past. Jack's breath froze as the shadows morphed into an unmistakable figure. Frank, a former associate whose opportunistic tactics had once threatened Jack's career. The sight of Frank's self-satisfied smirk catalyzed a surge of anxiety, washing over Jack like ice water. He had fought so hard to break free from the ties of his former life, yet here stood a reminder of all he had sought to abandon. "Thought I wouldn't find you here, Jack?" Frank called out, his voice dripping with condescension. The crowd's energy shifted, the vibrancy of the moment dampening as people turned to witness the tension brewing. "How did you get in?" Jack managed, his pulse quickening. Even in this moment, a time for revelation and vulnerability, Jack felt his old insecurities rise like specters from the past. The refuge he had found in honesty felt threatened, as if Frank was prepared to rid him of it. "Does it matter?" Frank shrugged with feigned disinterest. "You think you can throw a couple of heartfelt words around and suddenly be a champion? You're just playing a role again, Jack. It's not too late to reconsider your path back to the boardroom." Jack clenched his fists, the familiar pang of self-doubt unearthing memories of his cutthroat days in corporate strategy meetings. Was Frank right? Had he merely replaced one type of performance with another? He could feel his voice falter under the weight of Frank's challenge. "Today isn't just about me," Jack forced himself to say, trying to reclaim the narrative. "It's about understanding others and the stories behind their struggles." He met Frank's gaze defiantly, but felt the cracks in his armor deepen as he spoke. "Oh, spare me," Frank said, rolling his eyes. "You're driven by guilt more than passion. You think you can change lives like some kind of savior? People won't follow a phony, and you know it. The moment your shiny veneer cracks, they'll leave as fast as you think you can win them over." Jack's heart raced with fury and fear alike. There was a truth in Frank's words that cut deep, an assessment that could unravel everything he was building. Clara glanced at him, her eyes wide with concern, urging him to stay grounded. How could he stand resolute when his past resurfaced in the form of an adversary? "I'm not a phony," Jack shot back, his resolve deepening despite his uncertainty. "I've opened up. I've acknowledged my privileges, my shortcomings, and my intent to learn. You don't get to dictate my journey." "Learning? Is that what you call it?" Frank leaned in closer, eyes gleaming with mockery. "You're just another privileged kid in search of redemption, and it won't matter once the reality of it all hits you. When faced with true hardship, you won't step up. You'll step back." In an instant, Jack felt the atmosphere shift. He could sense the crowd's fascination, the tension magnifying as they soaked in the confrontation, their gaze darting between him and Frank as if watching a finely crafted drama play out. Would they side with him, or would they sense the truth in Frank's taunts? "I will find a way to bridge those experiences," Jack said, battling the fear coursing within. "I may stumble, I may falter, but I won't turn back." As the words left his mouth, Jack felt an unexpected surge of power. He was standing not just against Frank, but against his own internal critics, the voices that threatened to silence his aspirations before they took root. Frank's expression faltered for a beat, but then the smirk returned, more abrasive than before. "You think this is some character arc in a self-help book? Let's see if you can survive in the real world." With that, Jack's determination sharpened, fueled by the dissonance of Frank's words. It solidified a truth within him. He wasn't just battling for acceptance. He was reclaiming his narrative from someone who had no right to tarnish it. As he faced the crowd, Jack realized he stood on the precipice not only of public perception, but a pivotal personal transformation. What lay in the aftermath of this confrontation? Would he rise strong, or would he allow his past to cripple his potential? The question locked in his heart as he scanned the crowd, seeing reflections of both apprehension and support. Then, just as Jack prepared to respond further, a voice cut through the thickening tension, startling everyone. It wasn't the voice of a spectator or a critic, but a woman stepping into the light, her eyes filled with harrowing experience and profound wisdom. Jack's heart raced. Who was she, and what stories did she carry that might change everything for him? Jack barely processed the woman's presence, but something about her gaze captivated him. A deep-seated understanding shimmered behind her eyes, as though she had faced battles he could scarcely imagine. She stepped forward, the crowd instinctively parting. Jack felt the weight of the atmosphere shift, the tension momentarily eclipsed by her quiet authority. "Frank, isn't it?" she asked, her voice steady and clear, despite the chaos that surrounded them. "You thrive on fear, but fear only masks the potential for growth. Her gaze swung towards Jack, and a small smile broke her somber demeanor. "And you, my friend, stand at the threshold of a powerful choice." Jack's uncertainty flickered like a dying flame, reigniting in her presence. Could she see the turmoil within him? He found himself yearning for wisdom, for anchorage against Frank's accusations that echoed like haunting refrains. "I'm not here to fight," she continued, her tone softening. "I'm here to remind you of the strength found in vulnerability. It requires immense courage to embrace uncertainty." Jack nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words sink in. A voice from the past echoed in his mind, a reminder of the countless times he had clung to facades of confidence and control. Vulnerability had always been a liability in his world, an exposure he had learned to avoid at all costs. Yet there was a burgeoning understanding blossoming within him, challenging that ingrained belief. Frank scoffed, narrowing his eyes at the woman. "And who are you to preach about strength? What have you ever accomplished?" She turned towards him with a steadiness that silenced the crowd, pulling intensity out of thin air. Strength doesn't come from monetary gain or social standing. It is in the stories of those who rise from the ashes of despair, who find hope amidst tribulation. The real question is, can you see their worth? The crowd seemed to absorb her words. Confusion and intrigue reflected on their faces. Jack's determination mixed with curiosity. What stories had this woman lived? What wisdom could she impart about resilience? Was she really a mirror, reflecting back the doubts he had locked away? "You might dismiss her as just a homeless woman," Jack shot back at Frank, an ember of defiance igniting in him. "But maybe it's time for us to open our minds beyond our own experiences, beyond our own definitions of success." Frank smiled, but it was laced with arrogance. "The moment you think you can understand the struggles of others is the moment you show your ignorance. Can you handle the truth?" Jack glanced at the woman, who remained calm, her breath steady and deep. "There's a difference between looking at someone's situation and truly listening. What can you share from your journey?" he implored her, realizing he had shifted entirely from confronting Frank to seeking insight from this unexpected mentor. But instead of diving into her history, she took a step back and gestured towards the audience. "Every face here has a story, a truth waiting to be explored. Sometimes it's not about overcoming. It's about the connections we make through shared understanding." Jack's heart raced as he surveyed the crowd. He could see their expressions shifting, from judgment to reflection, from skepticism to curiosity. It was as if her words were planting seeds. He sensed a growing desire to delve into the real narratives that existed beyond self-serving ambition. Frank, visibly frustrated, shook his head. "You two are wasting your time. This is a circus. You don't have any real answers for them." Yet even his dismissal seemed tinged with uncertainty. He was losing the crowd. As Jack turned his attention back to the woman, he was struck by a realization. Vulnerability could indeed be strength. It was a basis for connection and understanding, and perhaps the foundation for what he sought to build. But would he have the courage to sustain that truth in front of Frank, amidst potential backlash? The woman smiled faintly, seeming to sense the breakthrough occurring within him. "The journey to understanding starts with a single step, Jack. Will you take it and see where it leads?" Her question hung between them, enticing him towards an uncertain but promising future. Jack felt the weight of choice pressing upon him, the gravity of confronting not only Frank's judgment but his own fears. How could he merge the lessons of the past with the call for authentic connection? Finally, he took a breath, steeling himself for the path ahead. It was time to shift gears, to explore a new narrative, one that could redefine everything he believed about success and failure. Just as Jack prepared to take a step forward, Frank interjected, determined to reclaim control of the narrative. "You think her words hold power? Let's test your new philosophy then, shall we? What if everything you're trying to build comes crashing down when faced with reality?" The challenge hung in the air, a foreboding specter of doubt creeping back into Jack's mind. Would he have the strength to forge ahead against everything he once believed about himself? As the crowd surged with interest, Jack's heart thundered with anticipation and fear, unearthing a truth he'd never confronted before. What would his next decision reveal? Not only to the onlookers, but more crucially, to himself. Jack's mind raced as he fought against the tide of doubt that Frank had unleashed. The crowd's expectation hung heavy in the air, and he could feel 1,000 eyes watching, waiting for him to crumble or rise. The woman's challenge was daunting, but more than that, it was intoxicating. For once, the swell of anxiety transformed into an urge to act, to explore his own depths instead of remaining shackled by the fears of isolation and judgment. Crashing down, Jack echoed, forcing his voice to rise above the murmurs. Maybe it's not about avoiding a fall, but how you get back up after one. He couldn't help but look back to the woman, whose steady gaze seemed to anchor him in this moment. What I have experienced in my world doesn't matter as much as what others experience. If we can understand each other's stories, we can build something that won't collapse easily. Frank's brow furrowed, disbelief etched across his face. And what, pray tell, do you think you can build? A perfect utopia from rubble? Your naivety is staggering. But instead of retreating, Jack felt an emerging clarity. Frank's disdain acted as an unexpected catalyst, pushing him deeper into introspection and resolve. We're all human, Frank. Maybe you can't see that, he continued, feeling the strength of his conviction swell within him. But building on understanding could be stronger than anything. You don't find growth in comfort. It lives in the messiness of our lives. The crowd was shifting again. Whispers cascaded from person to person. Jack sensed the stirring of something profound within them, a raw vulnerability that mirrored his own burgeoning insight. He turned back to the woman before him. What stories could you tell? How do we transcend our struggles together? Stories are the threads that weave our lives together, she replied softly. Remember, Jack, it's not just about connecting with others. It's about connecting with the truth within you. From that truth, you can draw authentic power. As her words enveloped him, a realization struck harder than before. His life had been mostly an exercise in isolation, masquerading as self-sufficiency. He had pursued success at the expense of meaningful relationships, the very bedrock of resilience. Jack had worshipped autonomy, only to find it was a mirage that left him more alone than ever. Building something real takes courage, she added, her eyes holding him captive. But it also takes humility. The humility to accept that your understanding will always be limited unless you listen deeply and share openly. The conversation sparked a fire in Jack he had not expected. Then let's lift the veils, he declared, his conviction strong. Let's share the stories that will take us farther than we could go alone. He stepped toward the crowd, voice firm. What if we share our vulnerabilities right now? What fears hold us back? Rather than hiding from our shortcomings, let's confront them together. Let's start healing rather than competing. Frank's face contorted in disbelief, anger simmering beneath the surface. You think they'll pour out their lives to you? You're a fool. But Jack felt a growing momentum, a growing belief that his voice could carry weight. Who's to say what they will or won't share? Maybe they've lived in silence far too long. Maybe now is the time for a change. The woman nodded, a knowing smile gracing her lips. Jack sensed the swell of anticipation in the crowd, an electric current of emerging stories waiting to be shared. He could see it in their expressions, a glimmer of hope tangled with trepidation. But something far more profound was blooming, a collective yearning for connection. Suddenly, Jack faced a choice that felt monumental: to leap into the unknown, to prioritize genuine connection over self-preservation. This daring act would demand everything: his time, his convictions, and perhaps even his pride. Would he truly unravel his guarded identity, lay bare his vulnerabilities, and invite others to do the same, all while facing the judgment of one who thrived on domination and fear? As he stood at the precipice of this new endeavor, Jack felt momentum build within him, igniting a determination unlike anything he'd ever known. The very next moment could lead to transformation, or threaten to reveal a raw, terrifying truth he'd kept hidden for far too long. What would happen when he took that step forward? Would his bravest move become a tale of redemption, or plunge him into deeper despair? Jack stood before the crowd, the weight of their gazes pulling him into a profound sense of responsibility. This was not merely an event. It was an initiation into a collective journey towards understanding and healing. Every heartbeat resonated with the pulse of anticipation as he prepared to step into uncharted waters, ready to confront both his past and the shadows of self-doubt that had haunted him for years. "Tonight is about vulnerability," he declared, his voice steady and resonant. "It's about nudging open the doors of our minds and hearts, revealing our authentic selves. Yes, I'm terrified, but isn't that what makes us human? To share our fears, our dreams, and our struggles with one another. That's where true connection flourishes." Frank's presence loomed like a cloud, his skepticism palpable. "You're falling into the traps of idealism, Jack," he challenged, an edge of contempt painted across his features. "You think those people care what you have to say?" But Jack refused to let Frank's words dim his fire. Stepping closer to the woman who had sparked his resolve, he met her eyes and reaffirmed his commitment. "Connection starts with honesty," he said, raising his voice above the rumble of doubt. "Honestly, sharing my journey means nothing if I'm not willing to hear yours." With that, Jack invited Clara to join him at the forefront. Her well-worn hands, scarred by life's struggles, raised slightly in invitation. "What do you fear? What keeps you awake at night?" she spoke, breaking the silence gently. "Let us share our burdens and insights." Her words ignited an emboldened spirit among the crowd. Hesitant voices emerged, sharing snippets of tales of hardship and resilience. "I struggle to provide for my family," one man confessed. Another woman spoke of losing herself in the battle of daily survival, each story unraveling the fabric of solitude that had once held them captive. Jack felt invigorated. He joined the conversation with honesty about his own insecurities, recounting how privilege had both shielded and shackled him. "I was lost," he admitted, stumbling through success without meaning. It took searching for connection through others to uncover my own truth. As he spoke, the crowd leaned closer, enraptured by the chain of shared stories cascading into a genuine dialogue. Vulnerabilities peeled away armor, revealing raw tapestry threads woven from common human experience. Frank, though still staunchly skeptical, seemed less a beacon of disapproval and more an audience member on the sidelines of this growing phenomenon. "Empathy is what transforms fear into courage," Clara affirmed, nodding as the crowd drew strength from the intermingling of voices. "Every experience is a thread connecting us all. When we share, we empower one another." Once walls had seemed insurmountable. Now they felt porous, giving way to colorful moments of connection and understanding. Jack's heart swelled with pride, not one born from achievement, but from this courageous exploration of truth. Something shifted within him, resonating with newfound clarity that bridged the spaces within his heart he thought were far too expansive, far too profound to traverse. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted again. Frank piped up, attempting to undermine the catharsis rolling around. "This is emotionally driven nonsense. People will forget your theatrics once you're out of the limelight." But the crowd was unwavering. They were enveloped in a warmth that spoke to a deeper yearning for connection and truth. Jack took a breath, transforming Frank's negative energy into fuel. "Maybe this is the starting point for each of us, Frank," he countered, his conviction sharper. "Changing perceptions takes work, but it also requires courage to step into the unknown. If you choose to stand on the sidelines, that's your loss." Jack could feel a shift in the crowd's energy, the power of shared stories becoming a living thread that bound them. People were looking at one another differently, smiles transformed into nods of understanding. They were no longer just an audience to his vulnerability, but a community weaving threads of experience. The conversations erupted around them. Someone new shared, their story resonating in the air like a melody. Jack realized he was not alone in his transformation. They all were evolving together. The vulnerability he had feared was now a bridge leading into profound acceptance and connection. It was an exhilarating revelation cascading through him like pulsing currents of energy. And then it struck him. This gathering was not merely a one-time event, but rather the inception of endless dialogues ripe with potential. They could create a continuous flow of understanding, a space of authenticity, devoid of judgment, and filled with compassionate exchange. His heart swelled with newfound purpose. By owning his vulnerability, Jack had unlocked something precious, not only for himself, but for every individual present. No longer would he retreat into the silence of his fears. He would commit to fostering ongoing conversations, cultivating the threads of connection that had begun that night. Jack stepped forward again, feeling the charge of possibility around him. "Let's continue this dialogue beyond tonight," he urged. "Let's gather, share, and learn from each other. I promise not to stand behind a screen, but to engage authentically with you as we navigate life's complexities together." As the crowd erupted into applause, Jack finally recognized the achievement he had longed for, not just personal growth, but a shared epiphany. He had laid the foundation for an evolving community grounded in understanding that could transcend the divides of society. Real confidence blossomed within him, founded on a solid commitment to weaving together their stories. With each pulse of excitement embedding itself in the atmosphere, Jack had conquered the lingering fear of vulnerability. With his position as both witness and participant established, he felt embraced by the very essence of what unity looks like, a tapestry created from diverse interactions that, together, illuminated the human experience. He marveled at his evolution, a transition from an isolated billionaire to an engaged ally seeking connection through shared understanding, determination transforming obstacles into opportunities. As the session drew to a close, Jack stood immersed in appreciation. How had he once thought success was measured only in numbers? This, the moments of genuine connection, held the truest form of achievement. Emboldened, he vowed to never forget this turning point, cementing in his heart that real triumph lay at the intersections of stories shared, connections made, and lives transformed. Now was the time to invite action among all who had participated. Jack glanced over the crowd, recognizing each face as a crucial element in this evolving narrative. With renewed energy coursing through him, he called out, "Let's document our journey together. Share your stories on social media. Let's inspire others as we continue our discussions." As voices resonated with enthusiasm, Jack felt fulfilled not just by the night's dialogues, but by the recognition of what they would become together. This was the moment his life had been waiting for, a moment to champion authenticity, where achievement transcended personal boundaries, uniting every individual into a shared narrative. At that instant, Jack knew he had transformed, not simply seeking to fill his own void, but becoming a beacon for collective progress. And in that realization, he achieved not only recognition, but meaningful connection. And as he embraced that sentiment, he called upon the audience to take action, to bolster the energy of connection beyond themselves. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this journey we've begun. And let's lift one another as we exchange ideas. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to recognize the power of connection, who must see the transformation that we can achieve by sharing our experiences. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.